Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my March reading review. It's something new I've been starting with the last couple months on the channel, where I talk about, real briefly, all the books I read that month, and then I start from the worst book and move my way up to the best month, and that my best book I give Book of the Month, and then ask you to talk about it as well in the comment section down below. Let me know what you read this month. And for the month of March, I read 9 books, and that's actually, not terrible. That's about average for me. I was, based off the first 2 weeks of the month, I was way ahead. I was tracking to be one of the best months ever. I was doing so well. And then the musical that I work at my school, and we do musicals, and I help out with them. And this musical, just because of things that happened, just absolutely ate up all my spare time for about a week. And then the second week after that, which was the last week of March, I basically had so much catch up from other things in life. I had podcasts for other things I had to do. I had interviews. I had all this stuff going on. And so because of that, I didn't actually really read. So I basically had 2 weeks of amazing reading, and then I had 2 weeks of very little to no reading. And right at the end of the month, with the last 3 days of the month, I quickly read a huge tome, which is also my book of the month. So why don't I go through the 9 books? I have a 1 2-star book on out of the list. I have 1 3-star book out of the list. I have 3 4-star books, and then 4 5-stars. And one of those 5-star books is book of the year so far. So let's go ahead with the one book I actively disliked, and that's very, very difficult for me to say, and that was The Sunlet Man by Brandon Sanderson. I know Brandon Sanderson is my favorite author of all time, and so it is shocking for me to say that I am giving a book of his a negative rating and review. And the video, I believe it's already out. If it's not, I'm pretty sure the video is already out. But this was heartbreaking that this one, just for me, just didn't work at all. I did not like the characters. I did not like the world building. I didn't like the action or the plot or the themes. None of it really worked for me, which was just really sad. It was the one negative of the month. Then you have a book that I struggle with how I'm going to rate it, because this is not my strong suit. For the podcast Literary Treks, I review books with them for Star Trek. And generally we do novels, but sometimes we do comics, and sometimes we do other resource books. And this month we read Star Trek Picard, The Art and Making of the Series. And this is a book that talks about the costuming and all the characters and the writing and the producing of the series, and shows the artwork for it for all 3 seasons. And I don't think I am the best expert on art books or guidebooks, so I can't say this was a really well done one or a really poor one. For what I wanted, it gave me a little bit of it, but what I wanted was more about the story and the writing aspects behind the scenes and the decision making, and unfortunately this is not a tell-all, so they couldn't get into everything. So instead, this book just kind of feels a little surface level. So I would guess I would give it a 3 out of 5. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. It's an expensive book, though. Ordinarily, it's $50, and this was one where the publisher sent me a copy. So this book review will be up soon. I don't know exactly when, but soon. All right, getting to the books I actually enjoyed, and I just realized I can put these back on this shelf because I made this shelf for this exact purpose. Getting to the books I enjoyed, these are my 4-star reads that I really enjoyed. We have Star Trek IKS Gorkin, which is a Star Trek book featuring the Gorkin and the Klingons from that ship, and I really have enjoyed this series. This is the weakest book in that series, but it's still really well done, still really interesting, and Keith DeCandido is still a top-tier Star Trek writer for me, and that review will be up eventually, too. I also read Twilight New Moon, which is also, I'd say, about a 4 stars for me, maybe 3.5, but somewhere in that vein. I read this book. My review will be up. Actually, it's already up. I just realized it's already up. And basically, I enjoyed it nowhere near as much as the first book, but it is still an enjoyable series. And I do enjoy the kind of seeing the characters and how teenage life works. I just am really fascinated by that. So that's that book. Next, I have a Star Wars YA book. Went from a paranormal YA to a Star Wars YA with Defy the Storm. Shockingly good. I had really low expectations, and this book actually was well above them. It's not an amazing book. It's not a top-tier Star Wars book. It's not a top-tier High Republic book. But this was enjoyable, and my review is already up for this one. Now I had 4 amazing great reads this month. These are all, I basically put them as 4.5 out of 5 or 5 stars. And these were great. And so the first one I'll talk about was Rebel Dawn by A.C. Crispin, the third book in the Han Solo trilogy that she did. It is a fantastic book. It is absolutely what a story I wanted from the series. Really tells an interesting story from Han and from Chewbacca and from Lando and from other characters. This book does some things that I wish book 2 had done instead, but they get them done here. And then this book has just an amazing finale. I mean, just the finale of this book was just so creative. So I really enjoyed this one. I think book 1 is slightly better, but this one was still really excellent. Next, I have a indie fantasy book that I read this month, A Silent Country by Morgan Shank. Morgan is a terrific author. I've read the first 2 books in this series, loved them. Third book is great. This is an incredibly consistent trilogy all the way through. Very good. Slowly the series started out as a Western that had fantasy elements, and slowly it changed, and now this is a full-on fantasy with a few Western elements. And I loved this book. This was a great read this month. As I said, if you like Western fantasy, you'll enjoy this. Then I read a John Grisham book titled The Chamber, and my review is already out of this as well, and I loved this book. This was an amazing, amazing read this month. I just absolutely enjoyed it. I thought that, it's a very fascinating, very thought-provoking read, and I thought that John Grisham just knocked it out of the park. It's probably one of his most serious books, but at the same time, it was just so interesting and well done, and the themes were just on par with his best. So that's The Chamber, and I thought that was going to be my book of the month. From most of the month. That was the first book I read that month, and so I was like, well, you can't top that. Well, I did, because there's one more book here, and it's a really long one, and I read it right at the end of the month, and it absolutely takes the cake as book of the month, and that is Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth. This is making the rounds on BookTube for a reason. It is an amazing book, and I have some thoughts. I am really fascinated by this book. I'm really fascinated by the character work, by the plot, by the action, by the story, by the world building. I totally disagree with the author's worldview, and I talk about that in my review, which will be up eventually. And I also did not like about some of the explicit elements in the book, which I also will go in depth on in my review. But suffice to say, this was not only my book of the month, I would put this as contention for book of the year so far. An amazing historical fiction that reads like an epic fantasy. And so this was an amazing book. So those are the 9 books that I read in March. A good reading month, not an amazing one, but a good one. I did better than last March, which is the good thing. Last March I only did like 6 or 7 books, so I'm doing better than that. So if you've read any of the books I talked about today, which ones have you read, and which ones were your favorites? And let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.